So my last video was my take on the Disney Channel Mount Rushmore, which was in response to all of the online debates happening. I said in that one that I'd do a Nickelodeon one if the Disney one did well, and it did. But I figured I might as well just run it back with a sequel now since this is the best time for it. Plus, a lot of you guys asked for it. See, that's the best part about this being a part 2. I ain't got to write a long intro. Y'all know what this is. I can cut straight to the theme song. Alright, just like in the last video, we're going to throw down a few rules. Number 1, this video was only going to be covering live action actors. I figured that was the most logical thing to do since it's as similar as possible to the Disney Channel one. The reason why I'm specifying this is because, yeah, technically Tom Kenny, aka the voice of SpongeBob, would totally be here. And while he's totally on the Mount Rushmore of voice actors, I feel like it would kind of just be cheating considering he's the only person in Nick history to play a titular character for like 25 years straight. Number 2, like last time, we will be mainly going off of longevity and impact. Though I will say the criteria for this one isn't as deep as the Disney Channel one. And you'd think that would make this easier, but honestly, it's harder. Number 3, again, like last time, I will be breaking this up into 3 tiers. No consideration, light consideration, and heavy consideration. No consideration means exactly what it sounds like. Light consideration means although I don't think they deserve it over other people, their careers still need to be acknowledged, and at the very least in the conversation. And then that last one means that everyone in that tier, in my opinion, has a legitimate argument, 4 of which will end up in the Mount Rushmore. You guys were surprisingly agreeable with my Disney one, but I can say with complete confidence that we're probably not getting that same result this time around. But I guess there's only one way to find that out for sure. Let's begin with the first tier of the video, no consideration. Okay, so I want to start this off by saying the tier list making community really let me down this time around. For whatever reason, I couldn't find an already made tier list with majority of the Nickelodeon stars. The only ones that I could find had either specific characters and not the actors, or only featured the female stars. Neither of which, for whatever reason, had Keke Palmer. So I don't really get that one. I mean, y'all got Andre's grandma and Mrs. Hafer, but not Keke Palmer. Yeah, okay, pal. So I had to pull a Thanos and do it myself. I threw together a quick little tier list, one that is actually up on the tier maker site, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to make one of your own. But to get us started with going through the actual people in this tier, I'm not gonna lie, this section was pretty much cake. So much so that I barely need to go through most of these choices. They're pretty self-explanatory. Nick's talent pool, for the most part, wasn't as deep as Disney. And on top of that, they didn't reuse actors as much as Disney did either. Like most Disney stars, especially in the mid-2000s and early 2010s, would get a second show, especially if you weren't the main character in the first one. Jason Dolly, Mitchell Musso, Debbie Ryan, Cameron Boyce, and basically every other Jessie kid. Nick was a little different though. They also had a lot more irrelevant shows than Disney as well. So yeah, chances are, if you were a part of those irrelevant shows and never went on to other things, you'd be disqualified. So I'd like to rule out the entire cast of the following shows: Super Ninjas, The Troop, Unfabulous, How to Rock, most definitely Bucket and Skinner, although that show did kind of pay my bills recently, and unfortunately, Just Jordan. I say unfortunately because, well, one, I just found out that the grandpa from that show voiced Jet Black in Cowboy Bebop's American dub, which is sick. And also, I just really like Just Jordan, especially the theme song, bruh, because... Actually, hold on. You mind if I wild out real quick? It's just Jordan. Already. It's just Jordan. Yep. It's just Jordan. Jordan. Alright, anyway, I got a lot of comments about me not mentioning any of the really old Disney Channel actors from like the 90s and stuff, and I'm gonna be blunt, no Emily. I made that joke in the Bucket and Skinner video. I'm gonna be blunt, no Dave. I don't really care about 90s Disney Channel. There weren't many shows worth actually caring about besides, of course, Jet Jackson. But 90s Nickelodeon, though, that's my bag. That's my LeBron look down on the ground to hit a 3 in the defender's face. You know what I mean? Some of y'all probably don't, but 90s Nick means something to me, bruh. That being said, the whole cast of Alex Mack can get up out of here. Some of y'all probably don't even know what that show is. It's about this teen girl that gets like hit by a truck or something and gives her every power in the world, basically.
Hi, Alex. Hi. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How come you wear hats all the time? Because I like them.
It's just that you wear so many. I just thought that maybe there was something wrong with your scalp or something.
Whoa, why she fry her like that? That's crazy. I haven't seen this show in a long time, actually. You might give it a rewatch. But yeah, it's out of here. This one kind of hurts my heart a little bit, but the cast of Clarissa Explains It All is out of here too. I know a lot of y'all know Melissa Joan Hart from Sabrina, but Clarissa used to go hard back in the day, man. I mean, I wasn't alive when it came out, obviously, but I did watch episodes during reruns and online and whatnot. So this is one show I'd actually like to review one day, but I'm worried it will flop. Then again, I was worried Buck and Skinner would flop too, so I guess you never know. This show was a hit back in the day, lasting 5 seasons, which was really impressive, and it almost actually had a revival. But since there's been more impactful and longer lasting shows, especially once the channel caught their stride in the 2000s. Speaking of the 2000s, going back to it, we got people like the cast of Neds who aren't making the cut either. Maybe if y'all get that reboot, we can talk. And then also, I'm ruling out most supporting cast of even popular shows. No one from Zoe 101, outside of Jamie Lynn and Victoria Justice, are moving on to the next tier. And most of the cast of Victoria's isn't moving on, but I'll go into specifics later. Overall, I think this is extremely fair. There's no one here that I'd move up. Full tier was on the screen. Like I said, Nickelodeon's talent pool wasn't as deep as Disney's. Not that the people are less talented, but the amount of talented people is lesser. Did that make sense? Whatever. Anyway, on to the next tier. Alright, so like last time, this is where things get a little tougher, though again, there are less people in this tier in this video than in the last one. This tier is for the ones that I think should definitely be in the conversation for a Mount Rushmore slot, but ultimately not over the people that I think have the absolute best cases. Some of these were pretty easy and some were on the harder side, so to get us started, we're going to talk about Big Time Rush. Now, right off the bat, there's 4 of them, and that alone kind of disqualifies them. I mean, this is the Nickelodeon Mount Rushmore, not the Big Time Rushmore. Honestly, I don't even think that joke was funny. I just wanted to make it before any of you guys did in the comments. Well, anyway, I do think Big Time Rush deserves some sort of consideration. After all, the show is one of Nick's biggest of all time. The official debut of it is actually Nickelodeon's highest rated live action series debut ever. It had a movie, and the boys are without a doubt Nick's most successful attempt at making music. But I do think at the end of the day, they were kind of the number 3 show behind Victorious and iCarly. And again, having 4 of them is low-key cheating, so I can't in good faith include them, but they did deserve to be at least looked at. Jack Griffo has put together quite an impressive Nickelodeon resume. The Thundermans Return, The Thundermans Undercover, Jinx, Splitting Atom. He also just had a huge presence on Nickelodeon in general during this era. He was always in something, even when it wasn't Thundermans related. Some people might give him some sort of flack for being part of the so-called newer generation of Nick, even though Thundermans came out like 12 years ago. But he really does have a super solid Nickelodeon career that just can't be ignored. I could go on, but I do think ultimately him being in this tier specifically is a mixture of timing and him just not being nearly as impactful as other people from even his own era, honestly. I do think he is objectively in the Hall of Fame, but I don't think he'll be on my Mount Rushmore. I know a lot of y'all hear Jamie Lynn Spears and think Zoe 101 immediately, which makes sense, obviously. But did y'all know that she actually got her start on All That? Now, granted, it was in the seasons that nobody watched, but still, that is another thing under her belt. Being the face of one of Nick's biggest shows, one that still gets talked about today, although not always for good reason, Jamie Lynn definitely deserves a little more attention on this list than the average Nick star. Not to mention she reprised her role in Zoe 102, which wasn't very good, but it did pay my bills a couple years ago. So ultimately, with how big Zoe 101 was back in the day, you almost kind of have to at least acknowledge her. But just like in the case of Jack Griffo, I feel like she was never really the face of her era, thanks to her sharing time with Drake, Josh, and eventually even Miranda, honestly. Regardless, I couldn't have gone this whole video without at least mentioning her in this tier, so yeah. Another person I have to mention is the one and only Keke Palmer. Of course, we have True Jackson VP, the show that she was the main lead in. This show was a calm little hit. It was never one of Nick's biggest shows, and it definitely started to get pushed further and further back once Big Time Rush and Victorious came out, but still, at least for a year straight, this was Nickelodeon's second most popular show behind iCarly. After the show ended though, Keke did end up renewing her contract with Nickelodeon to appear in not just the original movie Rags, but also she was a main voice actor on Winx Club from seasons 3 to 6, which I didn't even know about until recently. Keke was always pretty involved in Nickelodeon stuff in the late 2000s, and early 2010s, and was definitely one of the faces of that era. But I think what prevents it from going any further is the fact that for most of its run, True Jackson VP wasn't as popular as some of the other Nick shows at the time. It was almost always paired with the other Nick shows airing at the time. Whenever there was a promo for Nick, especially if it was some sort of themed programming, True Jackson would always be there with the other sitcoms. It just never took off the same way the other ones did. We'll give her props though, she is one of the leads of arguably the only relevant Nickelodeon original movie. Rags review coming soon, and I do actually mean that, by the way. We now have to address some of the victorious cast members, starting with Ariana Grande. Now yes, Ariana is probably the most famous person to ever come from Nickelodeon. Absolute music superstar nowadays, and of course, Wicked happened not too long ago. It's easy to think that she should be in the running because of that. And yeah, her resume, which has Victoria's Salmon Cat and Swindle, is pretty decent, but removing what became of her after her Nick tenure, I don't think it's like GOAT worthy. She certainly never left much of an impact on the channel. If Salmon Cat lasted longer, then I think she'd have a real argument, despite me absolutely despising that show. But there are more, for lack of better terms, legendary Nick stars out there in my opinion, as in people who had a large presence while actually being on the channel. An example of this, actually I still won't use the term legendary per se, would be her victorious co-star Daniela Monet. Daniela Monet low-key might have one of the longest Nickelodeon stat sheets of all time, bruh. Ignoring her guest appearances on other shows, since this is mainly about main roles, we have Victorious, Fred the Show, Fred 2, Fred 3, and the Fairly Odd Parents live-action trilogy. Plus, she was the host of both Awesomeness TV and Paradise Run, and she is still reprising her role as Trina Vega in the Victoria spin-off series that is in the works. I mean, I gotta say, that is a lot of projects right there. She probably has one of the deepest filmographies of any Nickelodeon star out there. But if we're being real, most of these projects were pretty trash. This is an example of when quantity isn't over quality, because while she did appear in a bunch of projects, more so than the average Nick star, she low-key appeared in some of the worst ones, which is mainly why I don't have her moving on to the next tier. I think she could be a Hall of Famer, I just don't think she's a serious candidate for being on the Mount Rushmore. But regardless, the sheer amount of project that she starred in at the very least deserve a shout out. And then lastly, we have the rest of the iCarly cast, specifically Jerry Trainer, Jeanette McCurdy, and Nathan Kress. All of them being a part of iCarly, Nick's biggest live-action series of all time, deserves, I think, some attention. While starring on iCarly, the cast went on to do some other stuff as well. Nathan Kress had his revival series plus Gym Teacher, and the main voicing role on Pinky Malinky, which was a Nicktoon that also aired on Netflix. Jerry Trainer actually got his Nick start before iCarly, appearing in Drake and Josh. Although it wasn't a main role, it was still a very impactful and memorable one. But yeah, obviously, he also has iCarly and its revival. He also has Tough Puppy, Wendell and Vinny, Best Player, and recently he was in the remake of Snow Day. I mean, yeah, dude has a pretty good Nickelodeon career, I'd say. And then, of course, we have Jeanette McCurdy, iCarly, Fred the Movie, Best Player, Swindle, and Salmon Cat. Her Nick resume is low-key as stacked as anyone's. So, why is she not in the final conversation for a spot on the Mount Rushmore? Well, while being one of the faces of iCarly, she wasn't the main face. That was obviously Miranda. As talented as she is, anyone whose most popular role is the best friend, whether it be Nick or Disney, to me can't be in that final tier of people. Sam is arguably the most quotable person from that show, and a really popular one at that. But still, at the end of the day, there's still a considerable amount of people whose names hold more weight with the channel. And I think that's fair, especially when you see who is in my final tier. Ultimately, I think I once again handled everything pretty well with this tier. There are definitely some choices in here that I think people will have an issue with, but you can't please everyone. I mean, hey, there were people in my last video saying that Miley shouldn't be on the Mount Rushmore. Some of y'all got some crazy takes. But alas, we've reached the final tier. A tier that will likely cause the most controversy of the video. Even more so than last time around. Let's get into it. If you skipped to this part of the video, you're a jerk, by the way. Alright, so to get us started, I figured I'd waste no time and immediately start talking about the two people I already have on my thumbnail, who in my mind are just automatic locks. Miranda Cosgrove and Amanda Bynes. Miranda Cosgrove to me is the Miley Cyrus of this Rushmore. You just can't argue against it. She got her start on Drake and Josh as Megan, of course, appeared in both films, and then later became the star of the Nickelodeon sitcom iCarly and its revival. Not gonna really count this towards your resume necessarily, but she also gave us About Us Now, which is a certified slapper if I do say so myself. I don't think it's crazy to say that Miranda Cosgrove is the only Nick star to ever come close to being on par popularity-wise to some of the big names over at Disney. iCarly and Hannah Montana were both some of the biggest kids sitcoms on TV, and were relatively close ratings-wise. To this day, iCarly remains one of Nick's most talked about shows of all time, and helps even more so that it got a revival series that lasted 3 seasons, and might even get a movie to wrap things up since it ended on a cliffhanger. Miranda was very valuable to Nickelodeon at one point. I mean, y'all were there, most of y'all at least. There's not really much else left to say. She is without a doubt one of the queens of Nickelodeon. But I say one of for a reason, because also in that conversation is the one and only Amanda Bynes. I got a lot of comments on my Disney Channel video filled with people who didn't realize how impactful Hilary Duff was, mostly due to age. So considering that Amanda's ties to Nick go back even further than the 2000s, I guess I'm gonna have to do a lot of explaining for the kids at home. Amanda first got her start on the network with the 90s sketch comedy series that I'm sure you guys have heard of, All That. And although she wasn't a founding member of the show, only making her debut in the 3rd season, she instantly became a fan favorite. To me, Amanda Bynes to this day is one of the most talented young stars of all time. The way that she was able to transform herself into playing different characters at such a young age was just unparalleled. And clearly Nickelodeon noticed, because after spending 3 seasons on the series, they gave her her own sketch comedy show. Now this is where Amanda's impact on the network, albeit being sort of incidental, really starts. When she was younger, Amanda spent some time at a comedy camp in LA, and while on stage she was discovered by a Nickelodeon producer, which is how she landed All That and later The Amanda Show. But you can't have a sketch comedy show with just one person, even if it is named after one person. So to pad out the cast, they hired actors around her, notably Nancy Sullivan, Drake Bell, and later Josh Peck. These 3 would later be added to the cast of Drake and Josh, where Miranda Cosgrove got her start from. I could go on, but Amanda's talent more or less led to almost every other Nickelodeon sitcom known to man. And even though this wasn't necessarily the intention when she was first signed to All That, that still makes her almost directly responsible for the entire foundation of 2000s live-action Nickelodeon and beyond. But even taking all that stuff aside, Amanda had a big presence with the network back then. She was constantly in the 90s game show Figure It Out, appearing in 52 of the show's episodes, had a recurring guest role in Rugrats, and appeared in Blue's Clues, oddly enough. She really both held it down and paved the way for the Nick girls. If Miranda is the Miley, then Amanda is the Duff. So that begs the question, who gets the other 2 slots? Well, I've narrowed it down to 5 choices, but this is where things get a little weird, although not necessarily with this first candidate. Although I always thought of her as being part of this tier, I've kind of gone back and forth on whether she's in my Mount Rushmore or not. But to start us off, we have Victoria Justice. She started off on Zoey 101, being a season 2 addition to the show. After that, she landed the role of Tammy in Spectacular, and later appeared in another Nick movie called A Boy Who Cried Werewolf. But of course, her biggest role came from starring in the hit 2010 series Victorious, where she played Tori Vega. She also guest starred in like every Nickelodeon show ever, basically, no big deal. Now I mentioned that while putting her in the heavy consideration tier was a no-brainer, I do kind of go back and forth on if she should get the final nod. And really it's because, well, I do question how big the name Victoria Justice really was back then. There were tons of Zoey 101 fans, tons of Victorious fans. But how many Victoria Justice fans were there? Was Victoria Justice a big name? Or was Victorious a big name? I do think it's true that Victorious holds more weight than Victoria Justice. But, if we're being real, the same kind of applies to Miranda Cosgrove, though I do still think she was a bigger name than Victoria Justice. So really, this might just be more of a Nick thing than anything. Victoria was without a doubt one of the faces of Nick during one of his most successful eras, and that still does mean something. She was never the main face. I don't know why I said it like that, but she was never the main face, but she still held her own. It's funny, she was appearing in promotions for Nickelodeon before she even had her own show, which just shows how much Nick was trying to promote her. I guess I'll make my final decision later though, because we have a much harder case to figure out. Two, actually. Last video, I was pretty consistent in not including multiple people as one entry, like the Jonas Brothers, or more importantly, the Sprouse twins. I was able to get away with it because Disney's talent pool was so deep. It didn't feel like anything was missing, even though some people argued I should have broken the rules anyway. But truthfully, the inclusion of duos does kind of feel like cheating. I don't think it's fair to put the success of two people in the same conversation as one person. At this rate, I think you guys know who I'm talking about. Two of the most iconic comedy duos from the 90s and 2000s. Kenan and Kel, and Drake and Josh. Kenan and Kel both got their start on All That, went on to getting their own hit sitcom lasting multiple seasons and appeared in 3 movies. The Kenan and Kel Two Heads Are Better Than One film, and both Good Burgers. These guys really did put up Shaq and Kobe numbers back in the day. But again, this is where things do get a little unfair, because although Kel's success on Nick is heavily tied to Kenan, he did go on to appear in 3 seasons of Game Shakers as a series regular. So, hypothetically speaking, this would be one thing that Kel would have over Kenan. But Kenan does have one thing that Kel doesn't have. Kenan hosted a Kids' Choice Awards, man. And that means something to me, I'm not gonna lie. Either way, there's no way I can include one of them and not the other though. We all know them as Kenan and Kel. And the same applies to Drake and Josh, honestly. Their careers are actually pretty similar. Started on a sketch comedy show, got their own, and appeared in a few movies. Even when they were on the set of Drake and Josh, they were still Drake and Josh, always appearing together on Nickelodeon and extra stuff. But like Kel, Drake did a lot more stuff with the network post Drake and Josh. He was in Rags, and he was in the live-action Fairly OddParents trilogy. Josh had a small role as Casey Jones in the 2012 Ninja Turtles show, but outside of that, and a couple cameos in the iCarly revival, he didn't do much post Drake and Josh. Either way, like Kenan and Kel, those boys left a huge impact on Nickelodeon, being some of the defining stars of their era. And it's just really hard trying to figure out what to do with them. So, we're going to put them to the side for now, talk about 2 of the relatively newer Nick stars that are also in this conversation. Kira Kosterin might be a name that some of you are surprised to hear, and while I do understand that, I also think she does somewhat have a case. Being the lead of the Thundermans, one of Nick's most popular shows of all time, Kira is one of the more recognizable leading ladies from the channel. What also helps is that she's reprised the role 2 times since then, appearing in both the revival movie and the revival show. On top of that, she also has a couple other films like One Crazy Cruise and Lucky, the latter of which I had no idea existed until now, not gonna lie. I think what also seriously helps her case is honestly just how committed and loyal she is to the network. She's gone on record to say that she loves making kids entertainment and actually lost her interest in acting once making sitcoms wasn't on the table anymore. Then she came back for the new Thunderman show and is actually an executive producer and director of it. I think because of that, her name definitely deserves to be up there with some of the GOATs of Nick, but realistically, she's not making it over anyone else that I have in this tier, and a lot of it just has to do with timing. This next one's gonna surprise anyone that stopped watching Nickelodeon after like 2011. And no matter how well I explain myself, some people are gonna fight against this just because of the fact that this person is a relatively newer star. But Jace Norman might have the most stacked Nickelodeon career of all time. Henry Danger is one of Nick's biggest IPs of all time. And I say IP because at this point, it's basically a whole franchise. It got an animated spinoff, a live action spinoff that Jace also appeared in from time to time, and most recently a movie. But aside from that, he appeared in what is probably a record-breaking 5 Nickelodeon original movies as the lead character. Splitting Adam, Rufus 1 and 2, Blurt, and Bixler High Private Eye. You know, I really should have reviewed a few of these back when the Jace Norman memes were popular. Anyway, yeah, his career on Nick is insanely stacked, and there's even rumblings about another Henry Danger spinoff being in the works, with Jace once again reprising the role. Jace Norman was the face of Nickelodeon for several straight years. Easily the channel's golden boy. No one else on Nick could touch him. And considering he has been relatively consistently involved with the network for 10 years now, he absolutely deserves to be in this tier. He really is one of the GOATs of Nickelodeon, and it can't be argued. Keep in mind, Teddy Roosevelt, compared to the other people on the Mount Rushmore, was a pretty late addition as well. The Rushmore ain't the first 4 presidents, but the problem is, there's only 2 more slots. Well, Kira respectively can be eliminated relatively easily, and I don't think it's crazy to say that. But the real issue stems from what I'm going to do with the two sets of duos. Drake and Josh and Keenan and Kel are really important in the development of Nick as a channel. However, y'all know how I feel about including duos. Alright, I've come to my decision. I think I gotta be consistent with my set of rules. It just wouldn't be fair to put a set of duos on this Mount Rushmore. We all know they deserve the nods, but I am committed to making this as accurate as possible. So, with that being said, to keep things fair, my Mount Rushmore is going to be Miranda Cosgrove, Jace Norman, Victoria Justice, and Amanda Bynes. But I've decided that because it's virtually impossible to leave out Drake, Josh, Keenan, and Kel, my second Mount Rushmore, aka my cheat Rushmore, will be Miranda, Amanda, Drake and Josh taking one slot, and Keenan and Kel taking the other slot. And no, I wasn't going to do another commission to have this done, so you're just going to have to accept this. I think this was the most fair route. Nick's history is a lot different than Disney's history, so while I did want to keep my rules consistent with that video, it is also hard to judge the two Rushmores the same way because we'd be leaving out some very important people. I expect this one to get more flack than the last one, honestly, but I'm standing by every single word that I said. I think this was a good list, and I explained everything pretty well. But I know for a fact that some of y'all won't agree, so let me know in the comments below what you would change for this list. And also, let me know what your personal Mount Rushmore would be. I'm curious. As always, don't forget to subscribe and like if you enjoyed the video. I'm Mr. Nostalgia, and I'm out for now. Peace.